Hello and welcome to this week's Talking Lower League with Talking Boz. Plenty for us to get through this week. We're going to be talking about the decision that's been made by both the Lowland and the Highland League. We've got champions, if you want to call them that, from both divisions. We'll be chatting about that. We'll be reviewing some of the standout results from the weekend that's just passed across the lower leagues. And we will also be looking ahead to what is an exciting weekend in the Scottish Cup third round. Plenty of opportunities for lower league clubs there as well. And I am overjoyed. Another hiccup last week, we could say that. But yet again, contracts have been signed. Our lawyers are no longer involved. We're amicable enough to be able to speak to each other without Ross this week, who will be returning, of course. Alistair Sloss, thanks for joining me again. Hope you're keeping well.
Yeah, I'm keeping well now. I've signed my new 12-year deal with Talking Lower League. Exclusivity has been provided.
I'm thrilled. It's good news, and what's a difficult time for everybody. I know you had a lot of different suitors and things like that. So no, for you to sign this exclusive deal with us is exciting. And yeah, very positive news.
No, absolutely. I actually turned down the position at Hearts for this.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. No, thank you. I know we've already discussed this during negotiations, so thank you. I thought we had an NDA. Anyway, moving on, and Ali, we may as well just get stuck into the kind of news coming from the Highland League and the Lowland League. Obviously, we're recording on Tuesday, the 30th of March. And really, today, statements from both the Lowland and Highland League stating that their seasons are finished for this season, and they have put forward their champions to go forward into what you could probably still call the potential League Two playoff to get into the SPFL. So obviously, let's kick off with the Lowland League. They released a statement saying that obviously they've been anywhere between 11 and 15 games really played. Obviously, a bit of a few teams had some games in hand and things like that. But ultimately, they've decided it on points per game, and they've put forward, of course, Kilty Hearts, who are the champions for 2 seasons in a row now. And it says in the statement that discussions are ongoing with the authorities to get the dates in place for the potential League Two playoff, to make sure testing gets done and things like that as well. And same with the Highland League. There was only maybe 3 or 4 games played. And Bora Rangers, what a week it's been for them, Ali. And they'll go forward as the champions there. I mean, obviously, before I come to you, Ali, to get your thoughts on this and whether it's the right thing, and obviously kind of looking ahead to the potential League Two playoffs, there's been quite a lot of chat on social media today, just around kind of, I don't know, I guess I'm a wee bit surprised at the quite a mixed response to this decision, but what else can they really do? They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They have to put forward, especially after not, Kilty and Bora Rangers not getting the opportunity to play in the playoffs last season. It just happens to be that both of those sides are top of the table again, but this is the right thing to do for me, Ali, in order to try and not only keep the pyramid system working, but improving it in the long term. Do you agree?
Yes, I do. I think that, as we always say, the upholding of the pyramid system has to take precedent after it was disrespected last year. And I mean, it's tough. It's tough to, especially in the Highland League. Brora have only played 3 games in the league this season, and they're now champions. And that is a precedent that has now been set, that leagues can be called after 3 games. People can be named, given exonerating circumstances, as champions. But ultimately, the 2 candidates have to go forward. I'm actually quite happy that it's the 2 teams that finished top last season. and it gives them a chance to maybe make up for what they missed out on last season. If it isn't, of course, then both teams have a chance to go for 3 in a row. So that'll be really nice for them.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that it's in the grand scheme of things, as we've touched on, it's probably worked out for the best. I guess the best in the best possible circumstances, really, of everything that's going on. And I think both of these sides in particular, Ali, deserve their opportunity to go up against what's probably looking like it's either going to be Brecon or Albion Rovers, to finally be able to face off against these sides, and on form, and just on probably on the form of the last couple of seasons, you'd say that whoever gets through between Kelty Hearts and Bohora Rangers has surely got a cracking shot at relegating one of those sides, Ali.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. I actually, I don't really know anyone that wouldn't have picked these two teams at the start of the season to not be in this position come the end of the season anyway. Obviously, BSC Glasgow and EK, East Kilbride were making a push. They're a strong team up the right end of the table. But I mean, in the Highland League, it's harder to make that call. But no, both teams, I think, deserve their opportunity, and both teams, I think, when they come up, will be great adverts for the Lowland Highland League if they make it.
Exactly. Obviously, Bohora Rangers have got, as we mentioned, a bumper week for them. Obviously, beating Hearts in the Scottish Cup, been declared champions, and then they've got another big Scottish Cup tie coming up at the weekend, which I'm sure we'll get to later in the podcast. Right, Ali, straight on to some of the results from the action at the weekend there. Just a bit of a caveat before we get into the games, as usual. We know there's some cracking games on Tuesday night. Obviously, tonight for us, we're recording on Tuesday night, and also there's a few games on Thursday night. We're going to try and mention them as much as we possibly can and include them and reference them, obviously, but there's no point in spending too much time, previewing those, because by the time you listen to this, most of those games will be finished. So don't worry, we're not ignoring them. I'm sure they'll get mentioned along the way. Right, Ali, if it's okay, I'm going to start with you in the championship. So let's obviously just do the usual and pick a result that stood out for each of us, and I'm sure others will pop up. Was there a particular one for you?
Yeah, that was, of course, Queen of the South piling on the misery at Tynecastle. Obviously, there was protests or rumours of protests, people gathering before this game after the fantastic result for Brora against Hearts. I won't ever condone people gathering about football related matters essentially at the time, but passions are high at Hearts, and look, Robbie Nielsen needed the team to bounce back. Robbie Nielsen needed to have a statement made after that result, and they didn't do it. And fair play to Queen of the South. They've absolutely came alive since about Christmas time. They are now powering their way up the table, could potentially be making a late push for the playoffs. And I'll tell you, after seeing his goals at here, our man of the season, Connor Shields, could be following Lyndon Dykes and Kevin Nisbet, etc. Maybe find himself playing at a higher level next season, Dylan.
Yeah, I'm smiling here because that's exactly what I was going to ask you about next was Connor Shields. I mean, what a season he's having. I mean, what an overall good season. That off the top of my head, I do think he was included in our joint championship team of the season so far with the pure championship guys. And we spoke about him at length on those podcasts. If anybody wants to go back and listen and see how that team's getting on now. But yeah, Ali, I mean, Queen of the South, despite the fact it's been quite up and down for them in the last couple of years, they seem to be producing these exciting young forward players. I mean, you've just said it yourself. I mean, do you think Shields will stay at Queen's for another season, or do you think he could be off?
No, I think he'll be off, Dylan. I believe he was only on a 1-year deal. That'll be up in the summer. He's still a really good age. He's 23 years old, similar age to Kevin Nisbet. And I reckon that he will make that jump. I think it's only natural that he makes that jump. To what level could he go to? I don't know. Could he maybe fit in at someone like Livingston? Does Jim Goodwin see him as someone who could potentially play in a front line with Eamon Brophy or Jonathan Obika? Sure. I think the boy's got a ton of talent, but he's quite unique in some of the attributes he can bring.
No, spot on. And I'm really, as you say, since Christmas, the turn of the year, it's been a massive turnaround from Alan Johnston and Queen of the South. So it'll be interesting to see if they can take momentum from this result into what is going to be obviously an incredibly tight playoff fight as well. Just before I got onto my game of the weekend, Ali, I just want to obviously I can't not ask you about Hearts and Robbie Neilson. Obviously, there's been so much noise over the course of the last few days and stuff like that from friends of ours, for example, podcasts, Hearts fan media, mainstream media. I think the big question probably to ask is, do you think he will make it to the end of the season? And do you think he will get next season in the Premiership for Hearts? I know maybe as people who are outside this bubble, it might seem daft to ask this question, Ali, but it's one I have to ask you after the week that's happened.
Well, the thing is, I thought the Robbie Neilson appointment was doomed from the start. Obviously, the way he left the club the first time around, results not going his way, not exactly an exciting brand of football. To then bring him back when he had the nucleus of a really good team at Dundee United, I think the fans were disappointed that basically Stendhal had to basically died for Robbie Neilson's sins. You know what I mean? Like he's and Stendhal's. I thought he was given an unfair shot at Hearts. I think he could have stayed. The fans were on board with him, although they did go down. Nielsen's not going to play exactly an exciting brand of football, and I mean, and it's ridiculous that we're having this conversation considering Hearts are 13 points off 13 points ahead in the championship. That, let's face the truth, they were a penalty shootout away from winning the Scottish Cup against Celtic, and we actually thought we're very unlucky not to win that game. But it's the performances, isn't it? Hearts fans have an expectation of the club, and Hearts fans have an expectation of the way they want to play football. And I mean, and it's nothing against Queen of the South, it's or anyone else that's beaten Hearts this season, but Hearts fans don't expect to be losing games at home against Queen of the South. They don't expect to be scraping by against Morton. You know what I mean? They believe, as we have believed previously, that Hearts are arguably the third biggest team in the country, and they should have the staff in the style of football that shows that. And they're never going to have that under Robbie Neilson. Robbie Neilson is a guy who is more suited to playing maybe a more defensive style of football with a team that's trying to kind of do well within a budget.
Yeah, no, pretty spot on, Ali. So I'm sure the next 5 or 6 weeks will be interesting. I just had to laugh. I think it was yesterday on BBC Radio Scotland when Craig Levein was on, and I think it was Kenny McIntyre who was asking him. People, Hearts fans, and people were blaming, this mess on you. Do you think it's harsh? And Craig Levein simply said, "Oh, you'd have to ask Daniel Stendhal about the mess that's been left behind." I mean, I'm just thinking to myself, wow. I mean, no wonder that man's opinions have gone so far down the pecking order for
Yeah.
Hearts fans and everybody else. It's just wild.
I mean, ultimately, I mean, talking about this move, it's been an absolute disaster for Robbie Neilson because he's already proven that he can get teams promoted from the Championship whilst having the biggest budget in the league, and considerably both times. It's not this does nothing for him. Hearts getting promoted again, and it's done nothing but damage his reputation at a club that he loves and he wants to be at. And it's disappointing and it's sad to see. And I think, for what it's worth, I think Robbie Neilson is a great guy, and I think Robbie Neilson absolutely has a future in the Premier League in Scotland, but I just don't see it being at a team the size of Hearts. That style of football doesn't complement that.
Yeah, I know. No, you're spot on there, Ali. However, a result that stood out for me in the Championship was actually on Saturday night. I watched the game on BBC Scotland, and it was at Dens. It was Dundee 3, Dunfermline 2. Another disappointing result for Stevie Crawford and a Dunfermline side that just seem allergic to winning at the moment in comparison to the way they were a couple of months ago. Especially after the start they made. Dunfermline were 2-0 up in the first 10 minutes. Obviously, it was finally a good chance for Kevin O'Hara to show what he's got, and he couldn't have made a better start to the game. Obviously, scoring after 3 minutes, then what has proven to be a shrewd signing. To be fair, he's been a good signing wherever he's been. I think Craig Wigton not only assisted O'Hara's goal, but scored to make it 2-0, and what must have been some halftime team talk by James McPake as Dundee came back and won the game 3-2. I guess from my point of view, I feel as if these two managers, and I mentioned that actually when I was speaking to obviously a friend of the podcast, Dr. Grant Campbell, for the SPFL 42 show, which is out this week as well. I was just chatting about I feel as if these two managers and their kind of stature and their pressure and stuff like that at their club seems to switch on a weekly basis at the moment, because how many times, Ali, have we spoke about James McPake being under pressure, and now it seems like the tables have completely turned to Stevie Crawford. I remember during the first season that we were doing this podcast, we were talking about Stevie Crawford, but under a lot of increasing pressure. I just feel as if it's a complete kind of seesaw for these two managers. But obviously it's a big game tonight, Tuesday night, Fife Derby, Dunfermline at Raith Rovers. That's a near enough must win, I think, for Dunfermline to cement themselves in the playoff. But what did you make of this one, Ali?
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting game. Dunfermline obviously starting off quite bright, and I don't know about you, Dan, I want to actually volley a question at you right now. See, when you go 2-0 up so early, how do you feel about defending that league? Some people think it can be quite tricky, and some people think it should be the easiest thing in the world.
No, I think especially at this level as well, where it's just so volatile. I think that it's one of the hardest things that teams can do, no matter how good the team is, especially away from home, going 2-0 up against a near rival in the first 10 minutes. It's too dangerous to go too conservative and too defensive, because you're inviting on that pressure. Whereas obviously you're trying to strike that balance between attack and defence. So I think it's incredibly hard, Ali.
No, I kind of feel the opposite. I think you go 2-0 up early in a game with the correct game management.
And you just go gung-ho, is that what you're saying? Just fire everybody up?
I just think with the correct game management alongside, I mean, let's face the truth, sometimes attacking is the best form of defence. If you just keep doing what you're doing, keep the ball up the other end, keep attacking, then yeah, it should be the easiest thing in the world. But that really wasn't the case in this game. Dunfermline went 2-0 up after 6 minutes and finished the game with 2 more shots on target. And only 5 more shots overall. And then you look at Dundee, finished with 21 shots on target, 21 shots, 7 on target. Come away 3-2 wins. It was almost as if Dunfermline got off to such a flyer, and then we're like, right, what do we do now? Panic, and then Dundee got one back, and then after that the momentum was all Dundee, and it was a real shame to see. I mean, incidentally, when you're talking about McPake and Stevie Crawford, Dunfermline have dropped 9 points in their last 5 games. Now, given Hearts' most recent run of form, they could have potentially been 4 points on 34 points, 12 behind Hearts, with 2 games in hand. They could potentially see you going to 6 points behind Hearts, then you've got a title race on. Dunfermline have stuttered and fallen off completely from the early point in the season. And Dundee have, they've dropped 6 points in the last 5, but they've almost done the opposite. They've kind of came into it more as the season goes, and the more like the new guys have gelled, and they've added really smartly to their team. And I think it was a great result for Dundee, and a good advertisement of where both teams are now. Dunfermline snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, and Dundee snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. Just goes to show where the confidence is and the mentality is at both clubs right now.
Yeah, very well said, as ever, Alistair. And another good advert just for the Championship on telly as well, which you always want to see. Obviously, there's a couple of Scottish Cup games on. I'm sure BBC Scotland this weekend as well, so that'll be good. Right, obviously, just before we move on to League One, Ali, I couldn't not, with Ross not being here this week, I couldn't not mention the fact that Ross's team that he'll put everything behind in the Championship, Inverness Caledonian Thistle, picked up another win, 1-0 at home to Arbroath. I think that's now 4 victories in a row for Neil McCann's side. And yeah, Ross's prediction of there's no way in hell Inverness are going down seems to be bearing fruit, and now they're looking up and potentially challenging for the playoffs there. So just a wee shout out to Inverness, just because Ross would kill us if we didn't do that. Right, Ali, League One. If it's all right with you, I'm going to kick us off here with a result that stood out. And I'm actually going to go for the game that, off the top of my head, I think actually was the kind of highlight preview game last week's podcast. And it's the game I watched at the weekend, and that's Montrose 2, Clyde 2. I thought it was a really entertaining game. Both sides going for it, obviously, two sides at the opposite ends of the table. But I thought it was a really even contest. Montrose, as ever, solid, dangerous in attacks, especially from set pieces. Of course, they took the lead with a penalty. It was a clear penalty, in my opinion, with a tackle from Kevin Nicol. And Clyde kind of, quite surprising considering the form that Clyde had been in this season, turned the tables. I was really, really impressed with Lewis Jameson up front for Clyde, who got a brace, seemed to team up really well with David Goodwillie. And perhaps, obviously, I know we've spoke about this so much off air, Ali, but, the kind of combination in the middle of the park with Michael McGlinchey and Kevin Nicol seemed to work for me, which baffled me, but it seemed to work for the majority of that game. But of course, Montrose coming back, and really it could have went either way for me this game in the last 5-10 minutes. But I think 2 points dropped from Montrose, but a point gained for Clyde. And to be honest, probably a result that doesn't really do much for either side, really, Ali.
No, you're spot on, Dylan. It was an interesting game. I was surprised to show that McGlinchey and Nicol seem to be working quite well as a pair, and that's just experience, which is what you need around all the energy in the Clyde team with the younger guys. Will of course, it will be harder for them, I think, going forward with the schedule. But you say it was a result that does nothing for both teams. I think it's a much more damaging result for Montrose, who could have seen themselves jump up to joint second at the weekend. The result got Clyde off the bottom of the table, which is always a positive. It also showed that Clyde, maybe not a one-team threat going forward. The young man, Lewis Jameson, had a fantastic game. Works really hard, and obviously the goal where he's chased down the keeper, just goes to show the work rate and the effort. And the thing with these loans is when they come from bigger teams and they're younger guys, I think it's purely an attitude thing. If you're a guy like, say, Scott Banks, who came on loan to Clyde, who has the right attitude, wants to play football, look at where he's ended up. He's now playing for Crystal Palace, very well thought of, although he's back out on loan in Scotland at the moment. Then you have other guys who we've seen come in at all clubs, come in from the old firm or a team like Hibs or a Hamilton or something, and they just don't have the right attitude. They see it as a step down, and then they end up kind of not taking advantage and not kicking on. And I think that from what we've seen from the boy Jameson and his effort and just chasing down the keeper, getting the goal, I think kind of goes to show he's willing to kind of take full opportunity, and that's really promising for both St Mirren and Clyde.
Yeah, exactly. I think you can clearly see a wee partnership potential really in him and Goodwillie, which takes obviously a lot of pressure on Goodwillie. Clyde rely heavily on him, and I thought the two of them competed really well against Sean Dillon and Kerr Waddle. You know, obviously we've spoke about them many times. I mean, I think it's arguably the best, centre back partnership in the full lower leagues. And they showed that at times on Saturday as well with their composure. Clyde didn't really get much, but they were unlucky. Can I, just before we move on to your game, Ali, can I ask you just your opinion on, we're talking about young players, young Ewan Otu, who only came to Clyde, a young defender, only came on loan. I think he's 18, from Celtic, made his debut in the 2-0 victory away to Keith, had what I thought was a really solid game, but then he really, really impressed me on Saturday away to Montrose. Obviously, I know you'll be watching the Clyde team closely. Has he impressed you? Has he given something different to that side?
Yeah, look, I was sceptical when he came in, based on absolutely nothing but the fact it's another old firm loan he coming in. But from what I've seen, I'm very impressed. I think great build, very quick. What the kind of younger guys that play like the reserve games and the youth football struggle with is the amount of time you get in the ball. They obviously get a lot more time playing guys their own age, but when you're playing competitive in the lower leagues, it can be very quick to move the ball. He's adjusted to that very well, very versatile. I believe he's signed a 3-year deal at Celtic, and that is a long deal for a young guy, so it goes to show how well he's thought of there. And again, he's another guy who's came in and immediately has seen this as an opportunity to kind of put himself in the market, develop, learn off an experienced coach. And he's been very impressive, and one who I would absolutely keep my eye on, and might be coming to a championship team near you next season.
Yeah, exactly. He seems like the perfect player for Danny Lennon's football in Ireland. I'll tell you that. He seems like the perfect, great work rate, great attitude, a lot of talent, and I'm really excited to see how he gets on. And obviously, depending what league Clyde are in next season, and obviously if he continues to perform, he would be top of my list to try and get another loan deal for him. But he may well end up in the championship. So yeah, obviously Clyde are up against Peterhead tonight, and obviously towards the bottom end of League One, it's really heating up. With Partick Thistle, going to Forfar tonight as well. So some big games. Ali, what was the result that stood out for you?
There can only be one result that I'm going to talk about, and that was Partick winning 4-2 away at Montrose in a game that I think cements my opinion that as much I love Ian Murray, loved him as a player. I think he's a really talented manager. I think there just comes a time when your time at a club's ran out, there's staleness, and they need a new energy in there. And I think Ian Murray, his time's up. Emphasised by this game, this was a must-win to kind of keep Airdrie in the playoff hunt, but they are sinking fast, and if they're not careful, could potentially find themselves in a relegation playoff battle. Stuart Miller's left the club as director of football. They look a bit unimaginative, out of ideas, Airdrieonians, and obviously there's been a lot of speculation surrounding their star player, Thomas Robert. And then on the flip side, Partick going to a hard team and getting the 3 points, kind of breaking that lose and draw duct that they've been in. And it's a great 3 points for them, moves them up to third. and with a game in hand over Cove, so potentially could be looking to move into second place and 5 points off top. And yeah, I think that, again, much like the Dunfermline game, this was a game that kind of emphasised the feeling around two clubs and the way that they both kind of performed and both what the result means for them.
Yeah, exactly. Thistle finally looking if they're kind of clicking into action. I was speaking to a Thistle pal of mine today that I work with, saying that Scott Tiffany, what a signing he's been. Saturday was just emphasising that. And on the flip side for Airdrie, Ali as well. I mentioned this on last week's podcast, as you know, with Ross. I'm firmly on the Griffin Sabatini train, and I have no idea how he is not starting for Airdrie in the middle of that park. Anytime I've seen him, he's dominated games, and that is what Airdrie need at the moment. And I know they brought in Paul Payton, who has went straight into the starting lineup. Paul Payton's a player that I've always liked, but I don't know. Maybe, granted, I try and watch as much as football as I possibly. I don't get to watch Airdrie every single week, but whenever I've seen Sabatini, I've thought he's been their best player. So yeah, I think that there's something not quite right at Airdrie at the moment, and it'll be interesting to see, how the season pans out for Murray. It really will.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be interesting.
The point that you make, I mean, you have a look at the kind of subs bench at Airdrie, and there's three names here that you're almost surprised to see there. One, obviously, Sabatini, Ali Roy not starting, Craig Thompson not starting. And like looking at this, I mean, it's a very defensive shape from both teams. But the difference is that Partick Thistle were effective and have players that are effective in their positions to get the most out of that formation. And Airdrie are trying to fit square pegs and round holes and trying to play a shape that doesn't suit the players they've brought in, and are trying to play a shape that maybe they might be better abandoning and just going for a straight 4-4-2.
Yeah, I know. No, you're right. And I think that's been a frustration of Airdrieonians fans for a while now, and it's that stagnation.
Yeah.
It's just gone on and on over the last few years for Airdrie. There has to come a point where changes have to be made, and that may well be.
Let's face the truth. Airdrieonians' tenure in League One has been shocking. How long they have been here, and every single season, it's like, this is it. This is the one. This is the season. This is the season. And you could argue that they've been, with Falkirk, Partick, Wraith, that's been competition, but they operate in a lot of the same markets as these teams. So
yeah. I mean, Paul Payton called them, the reason he signed on loan was because they're the biggest part-time club in Scotland. I mean, what a statement that is. Even when you've got Airdrie fans coming back going, what's he talking about?
But when Arbroath exist, you know what I mean?
I know. Of course, it is you we're talking about here. Anyway, we've still got Scottish Cup games to look at, Ali. So let's touch on League Two before we get to them. And I'm just going to fire this one right back to you, if that's all right. What was a result that stood out in League Two for you at the weekend?
Yes, Dylan. It's an easy choice, isn't it? It's Edinburgh City winning 3-1 against Stenhousemuir.
Yep.
A staggering amount of red cards in League Two, and I love to see it this season. This weekend, and this season. Fuck it, this season and all this weekend. But Edinburgh City, well, Stenhousemuir, Craig Little gets sent off in the last minute of the game, so I had no impact in the game. Edinburgh City back to winning ways, back to scoring goals. Rafali De Vita getting 2 goals. Always nice to see his name pop up. Edinburgh City taking their rightful spot as second in the league, which is kind of where we thought that they would sit this season, considering how fantastic Queen's Park look on paper, and they're obviously still undefeated. And Steny, maybe can't feel too hard done by going up against a very good team, a team that's got a lot of goals in it. Steny sitting evens and goal difference at the moment kind of tells all the story, and I think this game, the defence came up against a wee bit too much, and they don't have quite enough to kind of worry the defenders at Edinburgh City. But a great result for Edinburgh City, seeing them take their rightful spot in second.
Yeah, I mean, what a start to life in Edinburgh it's been for Gary Naismith. You took the definition of a new manager bounce, they've got it. And yeah, rightly back up where we originally thought they would be. And against a really tough Stenhousemuir side as well, a Stenhousemuir side that I've been really impressed with this season. I think they can go from strength to strength, especially next season when obviously Queen's Park will be out the league, it's looking like, and potentially one other as well. They can really, I think they can really challenge for at least the promotion playoffs next season. Seem as if they're really building something under Davy Irons again. So yeah, very impressive result. And Edinburgh City will might be a little bit too much for them to chase down Queen's Park, but they will at least be looking to consolidate in the playoffs and see what it takes them under the new management. For me, Ali, I'm actually going to pick a game that Ross pointed out that could be quite a good one at the weekend, and that's Albion Rovers. They took on Annan Athletic, and it finished 1 each. Quite a tight game at Albion Rovers, and what an important goal that could be from Jameson in the 93rd minute. What a valuable point that could end up being for Albion Rovers. Obviously, their nearest rivals at that end of the table were defeated by Queen's Park 2-0. And yeah, obviously, Jordan Loden as well getting sent off in the 90th minute for Annan. I think he's been quite impressive for them the last few weeks. And then Jameson popping up with that last minute equaliser, and I watched the highlights and you've seen the celebrations and how much it meant to them. And like I say, it's only a point, but they've got a game in hand over Brecon Alley, and that's them obviously now 3 points clear from Brecon at the bottom. And yeah, it just seemed like a really good game, evenly matched. And to be honest with you, Ali, Annan are just, I think Annan have been in this state, much like Cowdenbeath, for most of this season, is just in a bit of a lull, to be honest. So that must be difficult with the amount of games that League One and League Two sides have got in particular, when it's going to be too much, I reckon. They're 12 points behind Stranraer. It's going to be too much for them to make the playoffs, but they're probably going to be fine from any danger. So how do you motivate? How do Peter Murphy and the management team there and Cammy Bell and things like that? Is it mostly just planning for next season? So it's quite interesting to see how both Annan and Cowdenbeath are in similar positions approach the rest of the season. But Ali, valuable point for Albion Rovers.
Yeah, no, you're spot on, Dylan. And unlike Little's red card for Stenny, you could say that Loden's red card maybe had a bit more of an impact. Obviously, late in the game, it can be a momentum shifter, and you've rightly hit the nail on the head. Big point for Albion Rovers, one that actually brings them closer to 8th and 10th. Let's not forget that Cowdenbeath are not quite out of trouble yet, and if Albion win their game in hand in Annan, we could see them move up even further. But I think we've said all along, it's between Albion Rovers and Brecon down the bottom part of the table, and it's just going to be who can take these chances, who can make the most of these moments. That 3 minutes left at the end of a game made all the difference for Albion, and Brecon need to keep fighting and try and just stop conceding goals and start scoring. And Albion Rovers have scored nearly over double the amount of goals that Brecon have. It's not rocket science, You score goals, you win games, you get points. And Albion Rovers are doing that better than Brecon at the moment. And until Brecon fix that, there's going to be a lot of trouble for them.
Yeah, exactly. And I still think, despite the result of the weekend, Ali, and I mentioned this during the Restart podcast as well, I still think there's quite a few positives to take from the Brecon point of view. I think their signings are starting to bed in well, especially the ones they brought in, the more experienced ones. Obviously, a respectable result against Queen's Park at Glebe Park. So I'm really intrigued to see how they get on in the coming couple of weeks, because one win for either of those sides changes everything, I think,
Yeah.
mentality wise and points wise. So yeah, it'll be really interesting. Right, Ali, time to move on to look ahead to more Scottish Cup action. Probably one of the good things about this season being so condensed and on top of each other is that I feel as if every other week it's Scottish Cup weekend, which obviously gives us the chance to see games on usually Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which is always good. Easter weekend this weekend as well, so ideal. Right, well, I just thought that we could kind of highlight, obviously, a wee game each as ever, Ali, and then I'm sure that if we've got some time, we'll bring in another couple of games that stand out for us as well. I know it's really hard, and I was going to say I don't mean to put you on the spot, that's kind of why you're here, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Is there a standout tie for you, Ali, in the Scottish Cup this weekend?
Yes.
Brilliant. I'm so glad.
Do you want to know it?
Well, we may as well. We've started the chat, so.
So it's actually Dumbarton Aberdeen. I'll tell you
Early
why.
kickoff.
Early kickoff. Multiple reasons. Aberdeen. I don't even know if they play with strikers at the moment. They've taken up.
You wouldn't know.
They've taken up the Messiah Levids 4-6-0. It seems they just can't score goals.
So not 1 goal in 10 games, Ali, or something like that.
They get rid of every single striker at the club and brought in new strikers who then do not score goals for them. They might as well just get in contact with me at this point, or yourself. Just red shirt and tell us to try. Aberdeen can't buy a goal at the moment, struggling. And when that's the case, the last thing you want to see is a trip away to Dumbarton against a Jim Duffy team that you know is going to be very well organised, very well drilled for this game. A Dumbarton team that kind of proud themselves in being tough to break down, tough to beat. And I wouldn't put past Dumbarton to maybe spring an upset here, Dylan. The only question is, are Dumbarton get enough goals in them or enough talent going forward to kind of spring an upset?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know whether this has been confirmed or not, actually. I'll need to have a wee nosy and see if it has, but there was talk of Isaac Lane, obviously, who left Dumbarton, signed for Peterhead. There's talk of him going back to Dumbarton for the rest of the season. I don't know whether that's been confirmed or not. I heard a few things, but I don't know whether it's going to happen or not, or if it already has. If it has happened and he does come back, I think he could be potentially the perfect antidote to what you've just described there, Ali. Someone who I think we said we would love him at Clyde, for example. But yeah, that would be really important. Obviously, I know Dumbarton have lost Steph McCluskey recently as well, so that's somebody else from the forward line they've lost. But yeah, I think for Stephen Glass's first game, which is looking like it's going to be, and I said this on the SPFL 42 Scottish Cup preview show as well, Ali, I think you could probably say this is arguably the toughest game that Stephen Glass could have got. Yeah. His first game, managing Aberdeen.
A quick search has shown me that the Isaac Lane loan has been confirmed by the Press and Journal, which is a paper that operates in obviously that kind of area. So yeah, it looks like Isaac Lane has returned to Dumbarton. Great bit of business for both player and team. Bad news potentially for Aberdeen, but it is a tough game. Is Stephen Glass going to be in the dugout of the weekend?
I believe so. I think this is meant to be his first game, but I'm not sure. We need to look into that, but it could well be his first game.
I was just wondering, I thought he might have had to isolate as he's come to America, but either way, he'll be watching. And It's going to be interesting, to say the least. A great game for him to kind of see what his players are all about when things are tough, and he can make his team selection going forward against guys and see who wants to be there, who doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really interesting game, Ali, definitely. Tough one for me to try and pick, a game that is really stands out. There's so many games that I'm looking forward to on Saturday in particular. I'm going to have to go with maybe a bit of a predictable one, Ali, but we mentioned them earlier on in the podcast. The newly crowned champions-elect of the Highland League, Bohora Rangers, at home to Stranraer. What an opportunity this is, Ali, for Bohora Rangers to get to the fourth round. Obviously, the scalp of Hearts, which has been widely covered. What a result, what a performance, very well deserved. And they're going up against a Stranraer side that have been very up and down this season so far in League Two. They're finally seeming as if they're getting a wee bit of rhythm back. They had a draw at the weekend there. They will be in and around the playoffs. I think they should have more points than they do at this point in the season, personally. But obviously, I know it's their first season back in League Two after quite a damaging season in League One last season. But Ali, I mean, I don't want to come across as if I'm writing off Stranraer here. Stranraer are a good side, but what an opportunity for Bohora Rangers.
Yeah, this would have been one of the draws that Brora wanted. I think any team that's playing in the Lowland League or the Highland League will want to try themselves against league opposition, especially from League 1 and 2, and kind of make an advert for themselves. Or if you're feeling particularly dangerous, try and pick the top of the championship off. Brora previously have beaten Stranraer in 2017. That was at Stair Park. So look at this as a 3-year wait for the return leg. This time it'll be up in Brora. It's a journey. Let's face the truth, the journey plays a big part in it. It's a long journey from Stranraer to Brora. I think that Brora will be again very high off their game against Hearts. Bit of momentum there after having the layoff for so long and not playing. Obviously, Stranraer, kind of similar, not played much, not trained much. It's a great time for Brora to meet Stranraer. And I think it's going to be a great game. And I think there's going to be a lot of eyes in this one. And the potential, if Brora get through, for a real money spinner in the next round.
No, absolutely, Ali. And yet again, I think this is a fantastic opportunity for Bora to get through and cap off arguably one of the most perfect weeks in their history, you could argue. Ali, before we wrap up the podcast, there's a couple of televised games that I want to include featuring lower league sides that I want to touch on. The first one's actually on Friday night, so on BBC Scotland, I'm sure, and it's the Highland Derby, Ross County at home to Inverness Caledonian Thistle, 7:45 kickoff. Ali, how do you see this one going? Obviously, with Ross County, every time you think they're going to get a wee bit of momentum under Yogi Hughes, they seem to fall away. Whereas on the flip side of that, Inverness in the last couple of weeks have seemed to have found a bit of rhythm under Neil McCann. How do you think this derby could go?
Yeah, so it's obviously, a one-off game, derby match. It's an easy one to fire your players up for, but like you say, the word's momentum. Inverness have a lot more of it at the moment than Ross County. And it just depends what team is going to come out from the off and take the opportunity by the scruff of the neck. And whoever does that, I think, will end up the winners. Purely because I think it is so evenly matched, whatever team can get an impression in the game first can dictate it.
Yeah, no, you're spot on there, Ali. Absolutely spot on. I think this could be one that potentially goes to extra time. I think it'll be really tight, and I think Inverness will go and really kind of be rubbing their hands. Obviously, it could well be Jordan White going up against his former side as well, which would be interesting. I'm sure he's the person that was brought in to, I guess, quote unquote, replace him. Friend of the podcast, Mr. Sutherland, will be making sure that he wants to bag himself a goal there as well. So I think that'll be a really good Friday night game to watch as well. Ali, the last game I want to touch on before we finish up this week's podcast is on Saturday night, and that's at Celtic Park, and it's Celtic at home to Falkirk. 7:30 kickoff. I think this one's on Premier Sports, so obviously nobody will be watching it. Ali, what's your thoughts on this one? I mean, surely, obviously, with the season Celtic have had, we don't need to talk about that. Enough people talk about that as is. Celtic will be desperate to win this competition to try and save their season, if you want to call it that. Falkirk, really impressive in League One this season, fighting for the title. Surely this is just a free hit for them, but can they cause Celtic problems?
I mean, Falkirk already played Rangers this season, and that was very much a Rangers kind of B team, if you will. I'd get beat 4-0. Obviously, Celtic this season, as you said, are a completely different kettle of fish. If there was a time, I think if you were to look back over, say, the last 20 years, if there was ever a time that a lower league team would want a crack at one of the Old Firm, it would probably be Celtic the now. That being said, I don't really see much chance for Falkirk. There's just too much in this for Celtic, and too much in this for John Kennedy as well to let himself embarrass the club further.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair enough, Ali. I mean, you would love to see, Falkirk under the lights at Celtic Park and Saturday night on the telly, at least land a few blows on Celtic, which they may well do. I'm looking forward to seeing the likes of Callum Morrison, for example, up against Celtic. But I think Celtic will be going hell for leather to try and win this competition, much like Rangers will as well, who are obviously they're at home to Cove Rangers on Sunday as well. So yeah, some big ties there for lower league side to try and go there and do something.
Dan,
Alistair,
I know you wanted to end it in that match, but I've got a wee quickie for you.
Please go for it.
Former Tyne United Motherwell.
What way do I think it's going to go, or just my thoughts on both locations? Or
I just kind of want your thoughts on it, because I felt much like how Brora surprised Hearts. I think Motherwell, bad form at the moment, only won 9 games all season, conceded a shocking amount of goals. I think it's 59 goals in 33 games. That nearly averaged conceding 2 a game. Former Tyne have got to look at what Brora done and maybe see themselves potentially replicating. Again, Motherwell will have to travel. I just wanted to know what you thought about that.
Yeah, I think it could be a potential banana skin for Motherwell, to say the least. Go, obviously, as you say, the travel element, the fact that Motherwell are in a bit of an awkward place in the Premiership at the moment. They're pretty much safe, but not quite. They could get dragged back into it, especially they get beat 4-1 at Kilmarnock at the weekend. There'll be a lot of expectation on Motherwell to go to Formartine and get a big result. I don't think they will. I think this game could go either way, Ali. I think it could either be really tight affair with Formartine potentially causing a big upset, or Motherwell go there and put on a bit of a show. So yeah, I know I'm kind of sitting on the fence here, but it's going to be an interesting game.
No, I agree with you. That you can wrap up the show now.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. That was brilliant of you. Thank you. Right, I've been given permission to wrap up this week's Talking Lower League. Thank you to everybody for listening and your comments and suggestions as ever. And remember, you can get us on social media over at Twitter at TB Lower League. Search Talking Lower League on Instagram and LinkedIn, and also on YouTube now as well, where If you're watching this now, sorry we've had to put you through this, but please like and subscribe. Right, everybody, thanks very much. Stay safe, and we'll chat to you all next week.